We are then introduced to a world outside of the brothel, the food and whatnot. The food of the world, the oha or manga meat or peat, were salty and oily, food that guys like to eat. It is also here that we see how the males treat the females. All the customers of the restaurants were males, and there were no groups of girls chatting. People in this world use women like tools, as it is a matter of course, and there are piles of things you have to endure here just for being a girl. In this other world, a woman eating out alone was considered improper and shameful. Even if a woman was an adventurer, she would not be allowed to register in any guild. Such was the situation of Kyori, the young priestess who crossed on Chiba. The sex workers even had a date system, wherein customers can hang out with a girl outside for a fixed price. Taking home a girl was prohibited, but this rule was rarely followed. Basically, as long as the girl was with a man, they can go out for tea and it would not be considered shameful. Also, sex workers, like the real world, had low status. The difference is that the males in this world loved rape. If the workers was assaulted on the street, no one, not even the soldiers, would bother to rescue her. Haru would keep reminding herself that this world was not meant for her, or for any women. It's here that we hear another foreshadow from Lupe, her co-worker. But I like that about you, Haru. You seem like you might start something cool. During the third chapter, we see Haru trying to change that misogynistic view little by little, with something simple as putting a bench outside the shop and having a girl time. And it was girl talk that gave her essential nutrients. We are then introduced to Shikarazo, one of the top workers. Haru sees her as a beautiful woman, inside and out. It was Haru's goal to be like her someday. Well, one of her goals. There were also other things that Haru wanted to do, like have picnics or learn to cook. But perhaps her most ambitious goal was to change the perspective of women in the world, which she would later reveal after meeting multiple characters. And it was with Shikarazo's passing that Haru awakened to her real self. But even after her death, the male-dominated society claimed that her death was caused by an illness. Lupe, Haru's co-worker, is perhaps the closest friend Haru has. She had more experience in the industry, more than 3 years. And through troubled times, it was Lupe who stood out for Haru. Her experience was evident when the brutal soldiers took her into their table and sexually abused her after she spilled the drinks for the commander. She was a strong woman, trying her best to keep her pain inside. She served as the perfect confidant for Haru, as she is always right by her side when anything goes wrong. And it was also her who really saw Chiba's flaws. And at the end of the story, she tries to help Chiba out as much as possible. She's perhaps the antithesis to Kyori, in a way. Kyori is seen as this beautiful young lady with fair skin, wearing a white dress. Her past was something you would see in a medieval fairy tale. She was attacked by monsters, but an adventurer saved her. But unlike a damsel in distress who clung on to the adventurer, she pursued to save as many people as she could. She studied hard and got her license. And that's when she met Chiba and felt feelings for him. But it wasn't long until she fell out of love. Her personality, she was very pure at the beginning, not knowing anything about the outside world or how relationships work. But after learning how difficult it was to build rapport with Chiba, she begins doubting her feelings. It was while Haru discussed the current relationship of Chiba and Kyori that she realized the difference between relationships in this world and the previous one. We have to look at a person's face. Ask right away if you don't understand something. Make your opinion heard, correct yourself, or change the direction of the conversation if you're wrong. I can end this discussion right here with this statement, for it already carries the theme of the entire story. However, there is more that I would like to share regarding Kyori. After learning that Chiba prefers to go solo, without the need for a priestess, Kyori thinks that perhaps he had no place for her, and Haru then explains why. She ends her advice by saying, "You need to speak up more when you're talking about your feelings too. Boys in general have trouble hearing. And don't lose to misogynists. It's men and women that make the world go round." At the end of the story, we see her broken up with Chiba, realizing that looks and personality matter more than just strength. Other than the female characters, we also have the customers, those who would sleep with Haru, and she in turn gained a trait much more powerful than anything Chiba has ever learned. One of these characters was James' tall brother, or as Haru calls him, Sumo. Unlike most of the men Haru met, Sumo wore nice clothes and a little too timid for his size. This changed Haru's opinion that not all men were ruthless and savage. In fact, Haru even wanted to motivate Sumo to go and follow his heart. It took some time before he actually stood his ground and rescued Haru from a bunch of delinquents. But the very act of saving her was enough to know that Sumo was a gentleman. And so he was, even when they did it. Now, the first actual customer we were introduced to is the grimy face man. This man loved to choke his partners, and it was not rare in the world for men to choke sex workers, or just normal women. This character symbolized just how dangerous Haru's job was. Her second customer was a bard with a weird fetish for music. Instead of getting attracted by Haru's body, he was attracted by her poses. And the bard got off even more when Haru played a simple chord from Toritetsu, a Japanese rock song which she learned from her boyfriend. He even goes to comment that her playing was like a round-trip slap from a goddess. However, despite her playing, the bard didn't want her to sing because of how bad her voice was. What's funny is that they finished the same time as the song. Even in a different world, they're still perverts. At the end of the chapter, we see him playing a bad version of Toritetsu and the crowd's loving it. For Haru though, it was simply normal strumming. Her next customer was the opponent that Chiba beat up during their fight in the Colosseum. He was the first one who threatened Haru's life outside the establishment by saying that he and his lackeys could rape her anytime if she left. He was driven by jealousy, and it is here that we, again, get a glimpse of Haru's view on men. Sometimes I really think men are dumb, and they are definitely at their dumbest when they're having sex. This, again, is a foreshadow to a customer that took me by surprise later on in the story. Following him was a blacksmith who did it with Haru during the maid cafe event simply because she reminded him of his cat. Here we see how Haru gets familiar with her customers. She learns their preferences, their styles, their kinks. But after him, a group of thugs sexually harassed her and gave them service, while everyone watched. Haru couldn't do anything, nor could Lupe or their madame. They had already paid for her, so they did whatever they wanted. They even treated her violently as she did her best to give them service, as she dressed and acted like a dog. If not for Sumo coming to buy her away from them, who knows what might have happened to her. It's later on in the story that we are introduced to the silver-haired man. He did not leave much of an expression on the other characters, but Haru became attracted to him because he was cool. Unlike most men in the world, this man did not come to the brothel to crave his sexual desires. He goes there just to get a drink, and he only appears whenever it was raining. He found the idea of idiotic men losing themselves to the charm of women boring. He was the only male character that Haru did not find gross. To quote, "In this shop full of grimy, barbaric dudes, he was the only one who cleaned." At first, the man did not accept Haru's advances, but after telling him her story of playing kicking the can, he became a little interested, saying that children's games teach how to fight a war. But much to Haru's dismay, the man already had a wife and children. Still, Haru pursued him, and after a while, she found out that he knew about the real world. He knew that there were people who were transported in this world, but all of them died. After learning from each other, Haru finally had the courage to invite him to her room and gave him service and then some. And unlike her other customers, he was the one who never taught her any skill. And finally, there's a soldier, Mr. Bisky, Shikwazu's boyfriend. He's seen as this handsome young man who looked like he loved Shikwazu very much that he would stay loyal to her no matter what. And this was a time when the soldiers protecting the town took a break at the brothel. Haru slept with one of the soldiers and found them gentle in bed, but when a certain change happened, he and his squad were no longer gentle. Despite being Shikwazu's boyfriend, he sexually abused Lupe and made her do disgusting things to them. If not for the silver-haired man coming to the rescue, things could have been taken turn for the roast. After a while, things changed. The whole squadron changed, from the lovable and gentle soldiers to the brutal, cruel savages. And from here, we just how much I was struggling, but stayed strong. But I still smiled. I'm a pro, so I smiled. Later on, we found out that Shikwazu never came back after promising to boost the morale of the soldiers in their bases. Haru went to check her condition and saw just how horrible they were treating her. All of the soldiers were going up on her, and she was struggling. But her, and to all of the soldiers, it was her job. Afraid but determined, Haru decided to switch places with Shikwazu to at last stop her suffering. And what happened next were inhumane and disgusting scenes that were very disturbing to read. So gross that if I were to describe it, you would not be able to stomach it. And what more for Haru and Shikwazu? It's only scary because you think it's scary. It's only rough because you think it's rough. It's only gross because you think it's gross. Shut down your emotions one by one. Doing that will make your body feel just like a tool. Mr. Biscuit told me that. For 3 days, they used her as a tool, and each day she felt like she had lost her consciousness. Then we get a flashback from when she was still alive, how she was doing the same things there as she did in this other world. She was blackmailed into entering the industry. She was despised by her family. She was hated by society. So she tried to change that after transferring to a new school by being positive and attentive and politically correct. I felt like I was in another world back then too. And we see her wishing that she was back in the brothel, the lively pub, full of the people she knew and learned to love. It was the only thing that cheered her up, and this sudden realization that she had to go home. And so she did. With Mr. Biscuit's help, she managed to escape. However, Shikwazu was gone. Haru managed to release her from the barracks, but it was too late. Even Kiori attempted to heal her wounds, but to no avail. Shikwazu's hand was cold. Those lips she used to sing in that amazing voice of hers were dry, but she was still so pretty. I wanted a face like hers. It was time for the final battle. Haru had finally revealed her true self. It turned out that Haru did have a skill, and it was obtaining other people's skills. It was a skill given to her by God after they had sex. And so she not only learned what her customers were like, but also learned their skills. All her customers had unique skills. It was overpowering. It was a cheat of a cheat skill, much better than Chiba's. And so with her newfound skill, she kills all the soldiers, even Mr. Biscuit, who was only wearing a facade. She was able to overcome the soldiers. She became more powerful than any being. And when the deed was done, she cried her eyes out, feeling sick of a world full of idiots, sick of the fact that she was already one of them. She belonged in this world. The story concludes with Haru showcasing the changes that she had started with her actions. Outside dates and comfort videos were stopped by Madame after Shikwazu's death. The customers were now treating her like a normal girl, performing at a pub together with Lupe. They were even giving her flowers as a gift instead of giving rubbers in order to use her as a tool. Then she noticed the silver-haired man outside the pub and decided to bring him inside. And from him, we get this quote. I know that you're all from different generation. Evolution, change, those are things humans do. They're creatures that discard the past. The man leaves and all of the characters, except those who had died, were present in the pub. Sumo was Mao working at a kitchen in his own shop, with Haru suggesting that she make cute desserts that would cater to girls. There were now girls who would look up to Haru for bravely changing the status quo. More girls were walking around in public, eating cake, gossiping about men, and laughing at slightly dirty jokes. She was attracting the gaze of a misogynist society and fighting on. While this other world was cruel and ruthless, there were small things that Haru appreciated, like the organic plant-based soap and the fact that vegetables were insanely cheap and really tasty that even poor people can eat. And a few chapters later, during her visit to Chiba's feud at the Colosseum, she discovered that there were so many things that reminded her of Shibuya, a crowded city in Japan. There were tents selling food, and it looked like everyone was having fun. And so her initial thought that the only leisure activity in the other world was booze and women became null. The brothel was also open to Haru's ideas, like turning the shop into a maid cafe so she could show off everyone's cute side. Most notable event of all was when she saw a bunch of kids playing Kicking the Can and joined in. As she played with them, all of a sudden, the atmosphere of sex and misogyny disappeared. That one single chapter dedicated to Kicking the Can averted Haru's attention from being a sex worker. She was having fun, and so were the kids. It was a heartwarming scene, unexpected from a light novel centered around a sex worker. The boys saw Haru not as an object, but as a friend. There was even a time when Nas, one of the boys, said he wanted to cut Haru's butt off because it was in the way. But then they thought of a way wherein they could use that in their strategies. Female athletes were rare, so that's what made Haru feel special in the sport. And when the president of Kicking the Can attempted to rape Haru, the boys came and rescued her because she was an important friend. But in turn, there was a new rule made that only boys could play Kicking the Can, reflecting once more how misogynistic this world was. Finally, she learned what it was like to be responsible. Like when Chiba failed to understand Haru's situation, she realized that she didn't need a knight in shining armor, that she can survive without anyone's protection. Because of that, her customers started liking her as a person, no longer as an object. At the end of the story, we see how there have been rumors of a powerful being called a succubus lurking around, and Haru was well aware of who they were referring to, but she didn't care because there were other, more important things in the works. During the latter part of the story, we are introduced to God, and tells Haru that the world is what you make of it. At the end of the story, however, Haru rejects this idea and says that if she makes an effort, people will actually open their hearts. And at its core, that is what this novel is trying to convey. Even in a misogynistic world like Haru's, things can change if someone makes an effort. This is also true in the real world. We do not need to conform to the world if we are not satisfied. We have the power to change that. We too have hidden skills that have yet to awaken. We too have the power to set things right. Be it man or woman, child or adult, we can all change our world for the better. We just need to open our hearts and listen to one another, as Haru did. We do not need to adapt to the traditional world. We can adapt to our own change. I would like to end this discussion with a quote from our dear Haru. This is a nice place for boys to play. A world where boys, and only boys, get to live out their fantasies. They get all excited about rules convenient for them and hobbies that suit only their tastes. And if you say any little thing, they get pissed. But maybe it's time they were conscious of girls. If they knew what girls were thinking, they could discover so much. Maybe they're afraid that their world will be destroyed. But if they never go beyond their own giddy circles, then of course girls will think they're gross. Open your hearts. Listen a little more to what girls have to say. then this world would grow up and be more cheerful. Guys, thanks for watching this long ass video. I have not made a video essay this long in so long, so this is actually a new thing for me. But yeah, I love the light novel and I truly wish a lot of people would read it. Of course, you know, you have to be like 18 in order for you to read it. It's a good book, and I definitely recommend it to people who really want to read something new and something that could change your perspective of the world. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. This video took so long to make, and yeah, I'm just glad it's done, and I hope you guys liked it, and I hope you learned a thing or two. And if you did, leave a like, and also subscribe down there for more videos like this. As always, this is vanilla, not the flavor, but just sweet.